Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Bull Shark session. We're excited to bring this to you. Obviously, I hope everybody's being safe right now and staying at home. And we are lucky to have with us today Mr. Mark James. Mark works with AEP Energy and is a business developer and runs that section of the business, overseeing over 11 states. So we are lucky to have a little bit of Mark's time today outside of his normal course of business. So thank you, Mark, for joining us. We also have Ryan Shinnick, head of dive operations at Aquatic Adventures and GM. Ryan, thanks for coming on today. Ryan will be leading this interview. And again, we're lucky to have you guys on and glad that you guys are both safe, and really looking forward to a session today talking about some of Mark's experiences as an open water diver, as an instructor. Today Ryan's going to lead this session, so I will turn it over to him. But thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks everybody watching the Bull Shark session here. And Mark is an instructor with Aquatic Adventures, Ohio. So welcome, Mark. And Brian mentioned a little bit about kind of what you do for your daily professional life. So tell us a little bit maybe more about that, or some other things that you do.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. And thanks for pulling these together. It's really kind of a cool service. My day job is Vice President of Business Development for American Electric Power. And so I spend a lot of time working with our communities and trying to attract new corporate investment into our territory, because that's how we grow. By businesses coming to our territory, expanding in our territory, hiring people in our territory. And for the last number of weeks, not I would prefer to be doing, but we're spending an awful lot of time helping our small businesses access resources to help them during this really, really unique, difficult time. But my day job is that, and I love economic development as a profession. Been doing it a long time. And my mom said, my dad was a minister, said, if anybody's going to go into the profession, it's going to be Mark. And so when I got into economic development, I told her, second best thing, I get to help out communities, help create jobs in our communities. And I get a lot of satisfaction from that. So that's what I do.
Well, good. Well, I know you did your Dive Master program in 2015, and that was with David Resch. That if you saw the last Bull Shark session or one of the past, David was on talking about that. So he led your DM program, and then you did your instructor program about 3.5 years ago down Rainbow Reef, and then completed that and came back up and did a crossover with Clyde at Aquatic Adventures and started your instructorship here. So tell us a little bit why you got into the professional side of diving, what kind of made you go into the professional side, and some of your experiences here.
Sure, Ryan. Well, I got into diving originally because my now wife and girlfriend was a diver, and I happened to see on her family picture wall a picture of her standing next to a beautiful dreadlock shirtless guy. And I said, "Who's that?" And she said, "That was her dive master in Jamaica." And I said, "Well, I better get involved in this." I'd always wanted to, and just kidding aside. And so we dove a lot as an open water diver, and a lot of travel, loved traveling with her to go places. And I got the bug to go a little further with it. So my first class that I took with Aquatic Adventures was rescue diving. An excellent class. I learned so much. And my wife afterwards said, "I actually like diving with you more now. You're a little more safety oriented than maybe I was." But then on the professional ranks, it's, I really, this is all kidding aside to you guys. Aquatic Adventures is one of the best dive operations, and I've been in lots of places around the world diving, and to have it in Central Ohio is pretty incredible. So kudos there. But I talked to Dave Resch and said, I think I'd like to take on the Dive Master coursework, and I knew it was a couple of year kind of process. So we did, and I wasn't going to stop there. Of course, heck, might as well get my instructor license. went to Rainbow Reef mainly. They had a kind of an in-residence program, so you could live at the property, and that was appealing. And it was PADI to allow me to then cross over to do SDI. So I think I'm one of the few folks there that still carries both licenses, and they're very similar. I prefer SDI. They require that students learn and get oriented around dive computers, which has really changed the industry. And I think it's kind of silly to teach the sport these days and not use dive computers. So yeah, 3.5 years ago, and I think it was you, Ryan, said, hey, so we'd like to see if you want to teach some classes here. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, so it's been a great 3.5 years with you, having you here and teaching. And any experiences throughout your diving or training, or while you're going through your professional classes that you remember, or that you try to share with other students or other divers, and kind of that they can build some of their dive career and knowledge off of?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple things. Just in general, I do a lot of kind of teaching in this profession. The ability to help folks be able to explore what 70% of the world is water is really, I take a lot of pride in that. And I always tell every class when we start, we focus on two things here at Aquatic Adventures, and I try to live that. Safety and fun. And safety, I always write on the board, is above fun. And so to do this in a safe manner, because you learn a lot of skills to be self-reliant. And I'm sure Dave talked about that. That's where I learned it. And we use the skills to take care of ourselves and become a better dive buddy. Because if you haven't dived, you're always diving with a buddy. And so being able to help them and I've had lots of circumstances. I just got hooked up with a guy on a boat in Florida one time for a dive, and he kept having problems with his tank slipping out. And we're doing this, at like 35, 40 feet of water, working with his gear. He was having leaks. He was a mess, actually. But my training allowed me to be helpful to him and to keep us safe, because we were also doing some deeper diving on wrecks that trip. But I guess, Ryan, the one that really kind of drives it home for me, if you take open water scuba diver classes, you will learn how to share air. The modern scuba equipment has 2 regulators on it, one for you and one for your buddy if something would happen. I was in Polynesia, gorgeous place, diving with somebody I'd never met. The dive master, the guide, was barely spoke English. He was very good. He was checking air. This is our symbol for check air. He was checking air regularly, and I was fine. We were about to start our ascents anyway to do our safety stop, the mandatory 3 minutes and 15 feet. And I look again a couple minutes afterwards, and we were hunkered down in a little bowl because the current was 6 knots. And so we had to kind of hunker down to stay stable while we were looking at things going around. And I look, and now I have 60 PSI. And for those who know, you're going, what the heck? That much air had left, and expelled that much air. Turns out the second stage that you have is usually in this triangle between your chin and your ribs. And I was laying on it. And at the back of it has a purge valve that you can actually dump air, and it's useful for a variety of things to clear water out, et cetera. I was laying on it, and there was so much noise and activity, I did not know it. So it was leaking out while I was laying there. So 60 is not enough. So to do a safety stop, et cetera. So I swam over to the DM, got his attention, asked him to stop, and I told him I was low on air. And he kind of, like a puppy, he was like, what? But then our training together, and I never met this guy, and he hardly ever spoken, it kicked right in. We did every step exactly as I teach it, is exactly as we teach it at Aquatic Adventures. And he said, okay, so his last step was, are you okay to ascend? We're getting out of here then. And I said, no, I'm okay to continue the dive, so that we could, because there are other divers, and he had tons of air, as most DMs do. So we continued, and then slowly, not slowly, because we're in 6 knots of current, backwards, just floating up to our safety stop. I even helped them deploy the surface marker buoy that dive masters use. And we got to the surface, and at that point, he starts talking pretty rapidly in a language I didn't understand. I guess it was French. And I said, I don't know what happened. We finally figured it out, that that's what occurred. But just a couple of points. I knew the steps because I was trained to do it. As an instructor, you got to get these down so that you can teach them to teaching quality standards. And I think I have that on a lot of these skills. And the DM from another part of the world knew the same exact steps to be used. So they're universal, or and so the opportunity to be safe, and that I had a lot of dives under my belt, and that still happened to me. So it's an admission that you never know, and you have to be prepared for whatever might happen. But you can do it safely, and the gear is so safety oriented. It worked out fine, and I was able to actually look later to realize that, yep, second stage, alternate second stage. Don't lay on your alternate second stage. So
yes, yeah.
Experience.
Well, that's cool. I mean, as we work at the shop and through students, you always hear people refer to their training and knowledge, and some stories like that. You always hear people that come back in and dive or do trips. Oh, I remember during my training this happened, or you start to hear stories like that, and as they move up. So you mentioned Polynesia, and I know the past couple of years you've been doing a lot of great travel. One in particular that I've seen a lot of pictures and videos on was the Maldives trip. And if everybody watching, if you haven't seen this boat, the Scuba Spa, go check it out. And Mark helped lead it. Brian was there and helped. And I just see a lot of those divers and stories here. And you helped certify many divers, I think 11 divers in the deep specialty there, and a lot of different specialties leading up to that. So how was that trip, and tell us a little bit about that boat and some experiences there.
Yeah, Scuba Spa. So I'll talk about the trip and then the divers. Maldives is pretty far away. It's off the southern-ish western coast of India. And so quite a long flying to get there. But the water is incredible. The quality of the instructors and dive masters on Scuba Spa is probably the best no probably about it. They were the best team as a group of professionals that I'd seen on a liveaboard. And they had a spa, hence the name. So you could schedule a spa treatment. They would greet us every dive trip we got off. We had a separate tender that would take us out to a dive site and come back to the main boat for food. And you get up, you have a little coffee, a little something, you dive, then you come back, you have breakfast and you rest, and then you dive, and then you come back and you have lunch, and then you rest, and you come back and you have happy hour and dinner. And it was all wonderful. I think there were something like 30 staffers on this boat, and there were about that many of us. So you're treated quite well. It's a very, I consider it a very kind of high-end experience, but they are very safe. Safety briefings were wonderful. The diving was excellent. The gear that they have is world-class. So they left nothing to want really for a dive trip. The thing is, some of the best diving, if you are going to fully experience scuba, being an advanced diver is probably, I'd say, required. You can certainly see lots of wonderful things and just be an open water scuba diver with your depth limits. But in order to see some of the things, especially a lot of wrecks and such, you need to be an advanced diver. And that means you have to have certain specialties. Well, that's great because you get to learn other things like compass work, deep diving, specialty techniques around that. So there were 11 divers who had been part of this group that's been diving a long time, including the founder of Aquatic Adventures. And they didn't have their advanced card. Thousands of dives, but didn't have their advanced card, and they just won't let you go on an advanced dive if you don't have it. So the shop worked, Brian spent a lot of time, and other instructors as well, getting these folks advanced. And think of this, folks. So thoughts, lots of dives, thousands of dives with these folks. And so what are we going to teach them? But every person that I worked with, whether we're teaching them nitrox or teaching them advanced buoyancy, navigation, whatever it was, they all said, you know, I learned something there, even though they had all these dives under them. And then we got them out there and did the deep dives, which is a requisite skill. But that trip, Maldives, the boat, the company, Scuba Spa, as a dive operation, is really one of the best I've ever been on.
And I just want to jump in here for 1 second, Ryan, and personally thank Mark. I think you know, Mark put a lot of energy and a lot of time in teaching courses like nitrox and advanced buoyancy, and David in first response prior to this trip. And so thanks to you and David and for your work going into this. This is a trip that you went on, that you participated and paid for, and we really appreciate the work that you did with everybody. And going back to Mark's point, you know, almost every dive that we did was 70 feet or deeper at the beginning of the dive. And, you know, almost every dive, you know, that's 3 to 4 dives a day. So, you know, in order to really experience the complete length and differences in one dive, being an advanced diver really allowed you to see things at 100 feet, gray tips, right tips, gray reef sharks off the wall, all the way up to octopuses and turtles on tops of the reef at 30 feet. So to Mark's point, having that advanced certification, even on one dive, allowed you to see a diverse amount of aquatic life. And without that, and without practicing those skills, you know, you're at a little bit of a disadvantage to a certain part of the dive. So I think you're right on. I think the advanced certification gets you comfortable with skills, has you repeat skills, and you said it really early. That rescue class, when you decide to take it, is a great class as well. And we appreciate you going on that trip, and appreciate you allowing that door to open for everybody that went. So
a lot
thanks.
of fun. And I'll just tell you, as you know, before association with Aquatic Adventures, my wife and I got our advanced cards for the very reason Brian's talking about, so that we were able to go to wreck Kitawake, you know, and some amazing diving that you just can't do otherwise. And why not learn specialties to be better?
Right.
So, but I did enjoy the trip. That was a special one.
Yeah, it definitely looked like that. And as we're talking about the Scuba Spa liveaboard, that's you're staying on the boat for the week and you're just diving and they're taking you around. But you also have led some other trips. Last year you did the Belize Hamanasi and led that, which is a land-based resort. So do you have any suggestions or tips or what you may like between doing a liveaboard for a week or a land-based resort or dive trip?
I do. So, you know, liveaboard is, as Brian said, 3 to 4 dives a day. If you are a maniacal diver, I fit that category, you love that. And that's not even more, let's do more. It is a, no pun or maybe pun intended, a totally immersive experience in diving, where that's what you're doing. That's what you're there to do. And so it's a great way to stitch together a whole bunch of dives to either hone skills, try different equipment or whatever, because you got another dive coming up in a few hours. But that's what you're doing. And the boat's moving when you're not diving, so you're really, other than relaxing and being in your cabin or interacting and with the other divers, that's all you're doing. So that sounds awesome. My wife wasn't sure she wanted to, frankly, dive every dive. I think she only missed 1 or 2. So she ended up doing most of them. Contrast that with a land-based, like when we did Hamanasi, which is a really cool resort in Belize, where we had the opportunity to, the resort deal, the package that they put together for us, allowed us to do things like we did a 2-hour hike up to waterfalls into a pool you could swim in There was kayaking. There was zip lining. That was a treat through the jungle. I love that. And so it's a more diverse vacation that might be appealing to members of the family who don't like diving as much as some of us nuts. So that contrasted that way as well. But I would say on a kind of a price per dive basis, a liveaboard is well worth it, because you're investing one fee and you're diving. And the owner of the shop there, Larry, made sure that they kept a lot of diving going. But it just depends what you're into. I can tell you a lot of the land-based trips I do, if the conditions aren't right, and they weren't, to go out to some of the atolls in Belize, with diving was still phenomenal. You don't have as much opportunity to make up for, maybe a bad weather issue or whatever when you're land-based. It's not, but the boat can move and go to another spot.
Right.
So yeah. Right. So you're getting more use out of it.
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead, Ryan. I think there's one thing that, as Mark was talking, I think whether you're doing land-based or liveaboards, I think, there's an appeal at different times for different folks. But my big takeaway from diving with groups from the shop, and we are fortunate to be able to set up these trips, is that everybody has a great time and everybody knows each other. And at the end of the day, whether it's diving, land-based, zip lines, it's about getting the community together. It's about sharing stories. It's about having a good time. And, you start to realize towards the end of these trips that you're forming new relationships. You're learning more about people. And at the end of the day, those can be your biggest takeaways. And the diving, be it phenomenal, becomes number two. So, you look forward to your next trip with the same group of people or new groups of people, and sharing these experiences, the things that the group 27 divers in the Maldives experienced. And that boat is for that group of people that went there, right? And those are experiences that connect all 27 people that went on that trip, like they do with every trip that we take during the year. So that story just reminded me of that, and we appreciate that. And that's really, I think, at the end of the day, what unites us all around the sport.
Well said.
Yeah, it does. And I know we've talked many times when you've been in the shop and stuff, and in the background, I see you've got your running medals and into running marathons, but also with your love of diving, you're really big into sailing as well. So 2.5 years ago, you got a sailboat with the thought that sometime in the future, you're sailing around the world and diving. So is that, you got the sailboat just for that?
Well, yeah, maybe. No, sailing, I live in Columbus, Ohio, and so I picked two water sports, scuba and sailing, right? But it had been just an interest, and so my wife and I took a few lessons in Florida, actually. One Florida, one up in Lake Erie, and so I got a couple levels certification there. And we just decided, in retirement, whatever that is, it's not going to be, I kind of gave up golf a few years ago. And I thought, can't just, we could travel anyway, but so let's try sailing. So we started looking at boats, and we ended up buying a boat that's big enough for us both to live on comfortably. And we intend to spend, some months of the year doing that. It's like scuba and going up through the ranks, something new to learn every day. I've bottomed out. I've had my engine die on me right at the wrong time. I've had, variety of mechanical, electrical things, but it's just part of the learning journey. So love sailing. Yes, we intend to move the boat via the canals to Florida, probably in 2 to 3 years. We're going to explore the Great Lakes here. In fact, we have a 2-week trip planned this summer, willing, open marinas willing. And is built so you can dive off it as well. It's got a walk-through transom, got swim lockers that are big enough to hold both my wife's and mine's gear fully, and it's got a generator on board. So I just hook up a compressor and we can fill tanks as well.
Good.
And so I'll do some volunteer teaching. Hopefully, kind of, I think of it as a version of the the Outward Bound program, where you give kids that wouldn't normally get an opportunity for experience like sailing and scuba, kind of combine them and do some Discover Scuba classes and such off it. But yeah, we're gonna hit emerald waters here with this thing. At some point, it's an ocean-going vessel, so we'll see. But
Good.
Got to get closer to water. What's going on here?
I know. Well, we'll maybe get the Mark James Live Aboard Experience sign up here soon with that.
That'd be great.
Well, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ryan's getting ready to wrap up, and we appreciate having Mark on. I think for those of you that know Mark, and as I start to learn more about Mark, we share similar passions. I see guitars in the background. I play guitar. You mentioned golf. I did not know that, but I love golf as well, and we love diving. But if you don't know Mark, I think he really not only has passions, but works really hard to do them really well. And we feel lucky to have students under your leadership as a dive instructor, because when you put your mind to something, you give it 100% and you do it right. And people that take classes with you, they're lucky to have that, and I think they will find that benefit, if not training at the moment, somewhere in their diving career for sure. And for the record, that is the first guitar case with a scuba diver on it that I've seen. So hats off to you, sir.
It does. And it has a sailing sticker on it too that you probably
All right.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for those comments. I really enjoy the relationship with Aquatic Adventures, with the dive community that you have there. I tell folks, they walk in, this place was built to teach diving. I mean, and it's in Central Ohio. And I've lived that because that's where I went, not because now I'm teaching there and that's, part of the deal. But I really hats off to you guys for creating a great experience for the dive community here. And I look forward to us absolutely getting back in the water.
Yeah, same here. And Mark, thank you so much for your time today, and been great having you a part of the leadership and the dive staff the past couple of years here. So thank you very much for the time you've put in today, but also the time you've put into the dive facility the past couple of years.
My pleasure, Ryan. Thank you guys. Much appreciated.
All right. Have a good day. Bye, guys.